Marcus watched his brother pocket the keys to a mansion worth millions while he got handed the deed to a crumbling stone windmill nobody had entered in 30 years. Before we explore this story, make sure to smash subscribe because tomorrow we have an extra special story for you that will blow your mind. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and expensive cologne. The kind that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. He sat in a leather chair that squeaked every time he shifted his weight, gripping his 7-year-old son Noah's hand like it was the only solid thing left in a world that kept tilting sideways. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a cold institutional glow that made the whole room feel like a waiting area for disappointment. Across the massive mahogany table, his brother Vincent sat with his spine perfectly straight, wearing a charcoal-colored suit that probably cost $3,000, checking his phone every 45 seconds, like he had somewhere more important to be. He probably did. Vincent always had somewhere more important to be, especially when that somewhere wasn't next to Marcus. Vincent always had somewhere more important to be, especially when that somewhere wasn't beside Marcus. Their grandfather had died 3 weeks earlier. 89 years old, sharp as a tack until the very end. Living alone in that sprawling farmhouse outside Riverside, Montana, refusing every offer of help, every suggestion that maybe he should move somewhere with nurses and handrails and people who checked on him more than once a day. "I'll die in my own house," he'd told Marcus the last time they spoke, his voice crackling through the phone line like distant thunder. "On my own terms. You remember that, Marcus, boy? Always on your own terms." Marcus had promised he would remember. He just didn't know he'd be tested on it so soon. The lawyer, a thin man named Howard Pemberton, with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like rustling paper, cleared his throat for the 3rd time. He'd been clearing his throat a lot. Marcus figured that's what lawyers did when they were about to deliver news that would split a family down the middle and salt the earth where the cracks formed. "Gentlemen," he began, glancing between them with the nervous energy of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. "Thank you for your patience. I know this has been a difficult time for both of you." Vincent didn't look up from his phone. Marcus felt Noah squeeze his hand tighter. "Your grandfather, Theodore James Blackwood, left very specific instructions regarding the distribution of his estate," Pemberton continued, adjusting his glasses. "He was quite clear about his wishes, and I'm obligated to execute them exactly as written." He opened a thick folder, the kind with multiple dividers and sticky notes jutting out like accusations. The estate consists of the main house and surrounding property, approximately 240 acres, various financial accounts, personal possessions, and one additional structure located on the eastern boundary of the property. Marcus knew what that structure was. Everyone in Riverside knew the old stone windmill built sometime in the 1800s, sitting on a rocky hillside like a rotted tooth nobody bothered to pull. It hadn't turned in decades. The stones were loose. Birds nested in the gaps. Kids dared each other to go inside, but nobody ever did because the floor had collapsed in places and the whole thing looked like it might come down in a strong wind. "The main house," Pemberton said, his voice taking on the formal tone of someone reading legal language, "including all furnishings, the 2-car garage, the greenhouse, the barn, and the surrounding 200 acres of land are hereby bequeathed to Vincent Charles Blackwood." Vincent finally looked up from his phone, his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't quite anything else either. He'd known. Of course he'd known. Vincent always knew things before everyone else because he made it his business to know. To position himself exactly where the good fortune would fall. Marcus felt his stomach drop, but he kept his face neutral. He'd learned a long time ago not to show Vincent anything that could be used as ammunition later. Noah shifted in his seat, his small legs swinging beneath the chair because his feet didn't quite reach the floor. "The estimated value of the property," Pemberton continued, not meeting Marcus's eyes, "is approximately $50 million, subject to current market assessments." $50 million. The number hung in the air like smoke. Marcus thought about his apartment, the 1-bedroom place on the south side of Billings with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who played drums at 2 o'clock in the morning. He thought about his car, a 2003 Honda Civic with 198,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on so long he'd stopped noticing it. He thought about Noah's winter coat from the thrift store, the one that was a little too big but would fit next year if they were lucky. To Marcus Daniel Blackwood, Pemberton said, and his voice softened just slightly, enough that Marcus knew what was coming wouldn't be good. Theodore James Blackwood bequeaths the stone windmill structure located on the eastern boundary of the property, including the land immediately surrounding it, approximately half an acre, and all contents therein. Silence filled the room like water filling a sinking ship. Vincent laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, just a short, sharp sound like a door slamming. "The windmill," he said, and his voice carried that particular tone of amusement mixed with pity that Marcus had heard his entire life. "Of course, the windmill." Marcus didn't say anything. What was there to say? His grandfather, the man who'd taught him to fish and identify animal tracks, who'd let him sleep on the porch during summer thunderstorms and told him stories about the old days when Riverside was actually a river town, had left him a pile of rocks. Pemberton shifted uncomfortably. "There's a bit more," he said, pulling out another sheet of paper. "Theodore left individual letters for each of you. I'm instructed to give them to you now." He slid 2 envelopes across the table, one toward Vincent, one toward Marcus. Vincent picked his up, glanced at it, and tucked it into his jacket pocket without opening it. "Is that everything?" he asked. "There are some papers to sign," Pemberton said. "Nothing complicated, just acknowledgement that you've received the inheritance and understand the terms." "Fine." Vincent pulled out a pen, the expensive kind that probably wrote smoother than regular pens, and signed where Pemberton indicated. He didn't read anything first. Why would he? He'd gotten exactly what he wanted. Marcus stared at his envelope. His name was written across the front in his grandfather's shaky handwriting, the letters uneven but determined. He wanted to open it right there, but something stopped him, some instinct that told him whatever was inside needed to be read in private, away from Vincent's smirk and Pemberton's apologetic eyes and the fluorescent lights that made everything feel like a bad dream. "Marcus," Pemberton said gently. "Whenever you're ready." He signed the papers. His hand shook slightly, and he hoped nobody noticed. Noah was being so quiet, so still, and Marcus knew that meant his son was scared, reading the room the way kids do when adults are pretending everything's fine, but nothing's actually fine at all. Vincent stood, smoothing his jacket. "Well," he said, "I suppose I should go look at my house. My property. I'm thinking I'll renovate the kitchen first. Those cabinets are so outdated." He looked at Marcus, and his expression was something that might have been sympathy if sympathy came wrapped in condescension. "If you need help clearing out the windmill, let me know. I'm sure there are some stones that could be salvaged. Maybe you could sell them." Marcus met his brother's eyes and saw nothing there he recognized. They'd grown up in the same house, eaten at the same table, shared a room until Vincent left for college and never really came back except for holidays when he'd complain about the food and the Wi-Fi and the fact that there was nothing to do in a town of 3,000 people who all knew each other's business. "Thanks," Marcus said, his voice flat. "I'll manage." Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure you will. You always do, don't you? Managing." He said it like it was an insult. Like there was something shameful about making things work with what you had instead of always demanding more. He left without saying goodbye to Noah. The door clicked shut behind him, and the room felt both emptier and somehow easier to breathe in. Pemberton began gathering his papers. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I tried to talk to Theodore about this. He was very firm about his decisions. He said you'd understand eventually." Marcus nodded. He didn't understand. Not even a little bit. But he tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket, took Noah's hand, and walked out of that office with his head up and his shoulders back. Because that's what you did when life handed you rocks and expected you to build something. The drive back to Billings took an hour and 40 minutes. Noah fell asleep in the back seat, his head pressed against the window, his breath fogging the glass. Marcus drove on autopilot, his mind spinning through numbers and possibilities and the growing, gnawing certainty that he was running out of options. His job at the warehouse paid $11 an hour plus occasional overtime, which meant some weeks he cleared $400 and some weeks he cleared $250 depending on how much inventory needed moving and whether they actually approved his extra hours. Rent was $750 a month. Daycare for Noah was another $600. Then there was food, gas, utilities, the payment plan for Noah's dental work after he'd cracked a tooth on the playground, the minimum payment on the credit card he'd used to fix the Civic's transmission last year. The math didn't work. It never worked. Marcus had gotten good at robbing Peter to pay Paul and then apologizing to both of them. But there was only so much robbing and apologizing a person could do before the whole system collapsed. He'd been one bad month away from losing the apartment for 2 years now. One unexpected expense, one missed shift, one anything, and they'd be back at his mother's house, sleeping on the couch, listening to lectures about responsibility and choices and why didn't he go to college like Vincent. The windmill. He'd inherited a windmill. Marcus almost laughed, but it came out more like a choke. By the time he pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if he'd had the energy to notice. He carried Noah upstairs, the little boy's arms wrapped around his neck, his breath soft and even against Marcus's shoulder. Inside the apartment, Marcus laid his son on the bed they shared, pulled off his shoes, and covered him with the quilt Marcus's grandfather had made 30 years ago, before Vincent was born, when Marcus was the only grandchild and therefore the favorite by default. He sat on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope. The letter inside was written on lined notebook paper, the kind with the torn edge from being ripped out of a spiral. His grandfather's handwriting wandered across the page, sometimes neat, sometimes sprawling, like he'd written it over multiple sittings. My dearest Marcus, boy. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I imagine you're confused and probably hurt. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not sorry for my choice. I need you to trust me even now, even when it doesn't make sense. Vincent got what Vincent wanted. The house, the land, the appearance of wealth. He's always chased appearances. Even when he was small, he wanted to be seen, admired, envied. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not substance. It's not character. You got the windmill. I know it looks like nothing. I know the family probably laughed. Let them laugh. You've always been stronger than they gave you credit for. The windmill holds something more valuable than land or buildings, Marcus. But you'll have to trust me enough to look for it. Go there. Not just a quick visit. Really go. Bring Noah. Spend time. The answers you need are there, but only if you're willing to see them. I always knew you were the one who would understand. The one who wouldn't waste it. The one who would honor what it means. Trust yourself, my boy. You're braver than you know. All my love, Grandpa Theodore. Marcus read the letter 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and tucked it back into the envelope. His hands were shaking. He looked at Noah, sleeping peacefully, one small hand curled under his chin, completely unaware that their lives had just split into before and after. The windmill holds something more valuable than land or buildings. What did that even mean? The next morning, Marcus called in sick to work. He almost never did that. Couldn't afford to. But something in his grandfather's words had lodged itself in his chest like a fish hook, pulling him toward Riverside whether he wanted to go or not. He packed a bag for him and Noah, threw it in the Civic's trunk, and drove back the way he'd come the day before. This time in daylight, this time with purpose. Riverside looked exactly the same as it always did. One main street, a handful of stores, a diner, a hardware store, a post office, and a whole lot of nothing stretching out in every direction. The kind of town where everyone knew you'd gotten divorced before you'd even told your own mother, where your business was everyone's business, and gossip moved faster than the internet. Marcus drove past the center of town, past the turnoff to his grandfather's farmhouse where Vincent was probably already measuring for new countertops, and headed east on the old county road. The windmill sat about 3 miles out, visible from the road only if you knew where to look. It had always seemed like such a lonely structure, separated from everything else, watching over fields that had been planted and harvested and left fallow and planted again for more than a century. He turned onto the dirt access road, really just 2 tire tracks through the grass, and followed it up the gradual hillside until the windmill loomed in front of them. Marcus put the car in park and just sat there for a moment, staring. It was worse than he remembered. The stone structure rose about 30 feet high, cylindrical, maybe 15 feet across at the base. The wooden cap that had once held the windmill's blades was long gone, leaving the top open to the sky. Stones had fallen from the walls in places, leaving gaps like missing teeth. Weeds grew thick around the foundation. Someone had nailed boards across the doorway years ago, but half of them had rotted away or been pried off by curious teenagers or weather or time. "Papa," Noah said from the back seat, his voice small. "Why are we here?" Marcus turned to look at his son. "Grandpa Theodore left this to us. I want to see what's inside. It looks scary." "I know, buddy. But sometimes things that look scary are just old and forgotten. They're not actually dangerous, just sad." That seemed to satisfy Noah, or at least convince him to unbuckle his seat belt. They got out of the car. The wind up here was stronger than down in town, carrying the smell of dried grass and dust. Marcus approached the doorway carefully, testing each board before pulling it away. The wood was soft, crumbling in places, and it didn't take much effort to clear an opening large enough to step through. Inside, the windmill was dim and cool, the temperature dropping noticeably out of the sun. Marcus's eyes adjusted slowly. The floor was dirt, packed hard over decades, with a few scattered stones that had fallen from above. The walls curved around them, and high above he could see blue sky through the open top. Birds had nested in the upper reaches, and their droppings painted white streaks down the stones. "There's nothing here," Noah whispered, like speaking too loud might wake something. Marcus walked the perimeter slowly, running his hand along the rough stone. His grandfather's words echoed in his head. "Really go. Spend time. The answers you need are there." "What answers?" There was nothing here but dirt and stones and bird mess and the smell of decay. He felt foolish for coming, for hoping, for thinking that maybe this time things would work out differently. This was just one more disappointment in a long line of disappointments. One more time Marcus had believed in something that turned out to be nothing. But then his foot hit something that didn't sound like dirt. He stopped, looked down, kicked gently at the spot. Instead of the soft thud of packed earth, he heard a hollow sound like knocking on wood. Marcus knelt down, brushing away the loose dirt with his hands. Noah came over, curious now, and helped him dig. Beneath about 3 inches of dirt, Marcus's fingers found wood. Not just any wood, but smooth finished boards like a floor had been buried here. He dug faster, his heart beginning to pound. The boards formed a square, maybe 4 feet on each side, and at one edge, barely visible beneath the dirt, Marcus found a metal ring, a handle. "Papa, what is it?" Noah asked. "I don't know, buddy." Marcus wrapped his fingers around the ring and pulled. The trapdoor was heavy and the hinges screamed from decades of disuse, but it opened. Beneath it, stone steps descended into darkness. Marcus pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. The steps looked solid, carved from the same stone as the windmill itself. They led down about 10 feet to what looked like a landing or a room. Cold air drifted up from below, carrying a smell that wasn't quite musty, but wasn't quite fresh either. Something in between, like a place that had been sealed but not forgotten. "Are we going down there?" Noah's voice carried equal parts fear and excitement. Marcus should have said no. Should have closed the trap door, covered it back up, and called someone, a professional, someone who knew about old structures and what might be hiding in sealed underground rooms. But his grandfather's voice was in his head again, and something deeper than logic was pulling him forward. "Stay close to me," he said, and started down the steps. The stairs were steeper than they looked, and Marcus went slowly, testing each one before putting his full weight on it. Behind him, Noah held onto his shirt, breathing fast. The phone's flashlight bounced shadows around the narrow stairwell, making everything look unstable and shifting. After 10 steps, they reached the bottom. The room was small, maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, with stone walls and a ceiling just high enough for Marcus to stand up straight. But what made his breath catch in his throat wasn't the size of the room. It was what the room contained. Against the far wall stood a metal cabinet, the kind you might find in an old office, painted grey, with rust spots blooming across its surface. Next to it sat a wooden crate sealed with ancient nails, and scattered across the floor, protected from the elements by this stone chamber, were papers, dozens of them, some loose, some in folders, all arranged in neat stacks like someone had been organizing them and never finished. Marcus approached the cabinet slowly. The door wasn't locked. He pulled it open, and inside, illuminated by his phone's light, he saw rows of boxes, small, the kind that might hold jewelry or documents. He picked up the first one and opened it. Inside, wrapped in cloth, were coins, old coins, gold coins. He opened another box. More coins. Another, certificates of some kind, official-looking with seals and signatures. Another, bundles of bills, old but pristine, like they'd never been circulated. His hand started shaking so badly he almost dropped the box. He set it down carefully and backed away, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. This wasn't possible. This didn't make sense. His grandfather had been comfortable, sure, but not wealthy. Not this kind of wealthy. Not the kind of wealthy that hid gold coins and certificates and cash in a sealed room beneath a forgotten windmill. Papa. Noah tugged on his shirt. What is all this? Marcus couldn't answer. He picked up one of the folders from the floor and opened it. Inside were pages of careful handwriting, his grandfather's handwriting, listing dates and amounts and names of banks and investment firms, records, decades of records, documentation of purchases, sales, transfers, everything meticulously noted and filed. At the bottom of the stack, Marcus found another letter. Marcus, if you found this, then you listened. Thank you for that. The windmill isn't worthless, my boy. It's the most valuable thing I own. Everything in this room represents 60 years of careful planning, smart choices, and a whole lot of patience. I started with nothing and built this slowly, one decision at a time. I never touched it, never spent it. I was waiting for the right person to give it to, someone who would understand what it represents, someone who wouldn't waste it, someone who would honor it by using it wisely. That person is you. The total value is documented in the ledger you're holding. You'll need to get it appraised, authenticated, processed properly. It won't be quick, but it will be worth it. This is your second chance, your fresh start. Don't let anyone take it from you and don't let anyone make you feel guilty for having it. You earned this by being exactly who you are. Honest, hardworking, and true. Make me proud. All my love, Grandpa Theodore. Marcus sat down hard on the stone floor, his legs suddenly unable to hold his weight. He opened the ledger with shaking hands, squinting at the columns of numbers in the dim light. His grandfather had been thorough, listing every single item, every coin, every certificate, every bundle of cash, along with estimated values based on current markets. At the bottom of the last page, in larger numbers circled 3 times, was the total, $50 million. Marcus stared at the number until it stopped looking like a number and started looking like abstract symbols that couldn't possibly mean what they seemed to mean. He counted the zeros, recounted them, looked at Noah, who was examining a gold coin with the serious expression of a child trying to determine if something is real or pretend. Papa, Noah said, holding up the coin. Is this treasure? Marcus laughed. And then he was crying. And then he was doing both at the same time, clutching his son and the ledger and trying to understand that everything had just changed. That the life he'd been grinding through, paycheck to paycheck, crisis to crisis, had just split wide open into something entirely different. Something he didn't have words for yet. Yes, buddy, he managed to say. Yes, it's treasure. Above them, through the open trap door, sunlight poured down the stone steps like a promise, and for the first time in longer than Marcus could remember, the future looked like something other than survival. Marcus sat on the cold stone floor of that underground chamber for 20 minutes before his brain started working again. $50 million. The number kept repeating itself in his head like a song he couldn't turn off, getting louder each time until it was almost deafening. He looked at the metal cabinet, at the wooden crate he hadn't even opened yet, at the stacks of papers documenting decades of financial decisions made by a man who had lived in a farmhouse and taught Marcus to fish and never once mentioned he was secretly building a fortune. Noah had wandered to the corner of the room and was examining something on the wall, tracing his small fingers along what looked like carved letters. "Papa, there's words here," he said. Marcus stood on shaky legs and joined his son. Sure enough, carved into the stone, barely visible unless you knew to look, were words in his grandfather's distinctive handwriting, though these had been etched with considerable effort. Foundation built on patience. Walls raised with wisdom. Fortune secured through faith. What does it mean? Noah asked. I think, Marcus said slowly, it means Grandpa Theodore was a lot smarter than anyone gave him credit for. He spent the next hour going through everything in the room, carefully documenting it with his phone's camera, trying to create some kind of inventory, even though he had no idea what half of these certificates and documents actually were. There were stock certificates from companies he'd never heard of, some of them dated back to the 1960s. There were bonds, treasury notes, currency from different eras, all preserved in protective sleeves. There were letters from banks and investment firms, polite and professional, thanking Theodore Blackwood for his continued business. And underneath everything, providing context and explanation, were his grandfather's meticulous handwritten records, tracking every transaction, every decision, every calculated risk that had paid off. The wooden crate, when Marcus finally pried it open with a piece of broken stone, contained more of the same, additional documents, more gold coins sorted by year and mint mark, and several leather-bound journals that appeared to be his grandfather's personal financial diaries. Marcus opened one at random and read an entry from 1973, sold the South 40 acres to the Anderson boy. He paid fair price. Took that money and bought shares in something called Microsoft. The broker said I was crazy. Time will tell. Marcus laughed out loud. His grandfather had invested in Microsoft before anyone knew what it was, years before it went public or personal computers entered every home. His grandfather, who'd never owned anything more technologically advanced than a dial radio, had somehow recognized the value in computer software decades before it was obvious. We need to go, Marcus finally said, though everything in him wanted to stay down here, to keep reading, to understand how this had happened, but it was getting late and he needed time to think, to process, to figure out what came next. More importantly, he needed to make sure this room stayed secure. If Vincent found out about this, if anyone found out about this before Marcus had time to protect it legally, things would get complicated fast. They climbed back up the stone steps, and Marcus carefully lowered the trap door, making sure it settled properly. Then he spent 10 minutes spreading dirt back over it, smoothing it out, making it look undisturbed. When he was satisfied, he took Noah's hand and led him back outside. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the Montana grasslands in shades of amber and gold. Marcus stood there for a moment, looking at the windmill with completely different eyes. This wasn't a ruin. This wasn't a pile of worthless stones. This was a vault, a fortress, a carefully constructed hiding place designed to protect something precious until the right person came along. But as he stood there, something else caught his attention. The windmill itself, the structure above ground, had always seemed random in its construction, like stones had been piled haphazardly over the years as repairs were needed. But now, looking at it with purpose, Marcus noticed patterns he'd never seen before. The stones weren't random at all, they were deliberately arranged with specific types of stone placed at specific intervals. Some sections had been built with darker stones, others with lighter ones, creating a subtle pattern that spiraled around the structure. Papa, I'm hungry, Noah said, breaking his concentration. I know, buddy. We'll get food soon. Just a few more minutes. Marcus walked around the windmill slowly, studying it, trying to understand what he was seeing. The pattern of stones, the way certain sections seemed newer than others despite all of it looking ancient, the small marks carved into specific stones at regular intervals. It wasn't just construction, it was communication. His grandfather had built a code into the very walls of this structure. Something that would mean nothing to a casual observer, but everything to someone who knew to look. He pulled out his phone and took pictures of everything, documenting the patterns, the marks, the way the stones fit together. He was so absorbed in this task that he didn't hear the truck approaching until it was pulling up next to his Civic. Marcus's heart jumped into his throat. He moved quickly to put himself between Noah and whoever was coming, his mind racing through possibilities. Vincent, come to gloat. A local busybody, come to gossip. Someone who'd heard about the inheritance and wanted to see what the poor brother got stuck with. But the man who climbed out of the old Ford pickup wasn't any of those people. He was elderly, probably in his mid-80s, with white hair and a face carved by decades of Montana wind. He wore overalls and work boots and moved with the careful precision of someone whose body had started betraying him, but whose will refuse to acknowledge it. Didn't mean to startle you, he said, his voice gravelly but kind. So your car from the road. Figured I'd come see who was poking around Theodore's windmill. I'm Marcus, he said, still wary. Theodore's grandson. The man's face softened. Marcus, of course you are. Should have recognized you. But it's been years. I'm Thomas Brennan. I farm the property just west of here. Your grandfather and I were neighbors for near about 60 years. Marcus relaxed slightly. The name was familiar. His grandfather had mentioned Thomas occasionally, usually when talking about him helping fix something or bringing over vegetables from his garden. It's nice to meet you properly, he said. Thomas looked at the windmill and something passed over his face. Something Marcus couldn't quite read. Sadness maybe, or respect, or both. So he left you the mill, he said. It wasn't a question. She did. Everyone thinks it's funny. A pile of rocks. Everyone's a fool. Then Thomas walked closer to the structure, placing his weathered hand on the stones with a gentleness that suggested affection. Your grandfather bought this property in 1964. Paid cash for it. 10 acres of nothing, everyone said. Why'd he want that useless land with that falling down mill? But Theodore, he just smiled and said he liked the view. You were there when he bought it. Helped him with the paperwork. I was younger then. Thought I knew everything. He chuckled. Theodore taught me otherwise. He had a way of seeing things other people missed. Value where others saw waste, possibility where others saw problems. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Mr. Brennan, do you know anything about this windmill? About why it was important to him? Thomas turned to look at him, and his eyes were sharp despite his age. I know your grandfather trusted you with it. That tells me everything I need to know. He paused, then added, but I also know he was a man with layers. What you see on the surface is never the whole story. This mill, for instance, looks like it's been abandoned for 100 years. But Theodore came out here regular, once a month, like clockwork. Told people he was checking for structural damage, making sure it wasn't going to collapse on some kid who wandered in. But I always wondered why he needed to check something that never changed. Why he'd spend an hour or more inside when there wasn't anything to see except bird droppings and fallen stones. Why he always brought that old canvas bag with him and left with it looking just as heavy as when he arrived. He met Marcus's eyes. Your grandfather was protecting something, Marcus. I didn't ask what because it wasn't my business, but I'm glad he gave it to you and not that brother of yours. Marcus's throat tightened. You know, Vincent met him a few times over the years. Cold as a January morning, that one. Theodore worried about him, but he knew better than to give him something that required character to handle properly. He smiled slightly. You got character, Marcus. Theodore told me so. Said you were the strong one, even if you didn't know it yet. They stood in silence for a moment, and Marcus felt the weight of trust settling over his shoulders. His grandfather had been preparing for this, building toward this moment. For decades, every choice, every investment, every careful decision had been made with Marcus in mind, with the belief that someday Marcus would be standing exactly where he was now, ready to receive what had been hidden. "Mr. Brennan," Marcus said carefully, "if I needed help understanding something about this windmill, about its structure or its history, would you be willing to talk?" "Anytime," he said. "I'm 3 miles west, the farm with the red barn," Thomas said. "You'll see my name on the mailbox. I don't sleep much these days anyway. Old age." He tipped his head toward Noah, who'd been watching the entire exchange with the quiet intensity of a child absorbing adult conversation. "Your little one looks hungry. You should get him fed." "Thank you for stopping and telling me about my grandfather," Marcus said. "He was a good man. Best neighbor I ever had." "You do right by his memory, Marcus. Whatever he left you, he meant for you to have it." Thomas climbed back into his truck, and as he drove away, raised one hand in farewell. Marcus stood there until the truck disappeared down the dirt road, his mind racing. Thomas had essentially confirmed that his grandfather had been coming here regularly, that he'd been protecting something, that this windmill was more than it appeared. But he'd also been careful not to say too much, respecting Theodore's privacy even after his death. That kind of loyalty was rare. "Mama, can we go now?" Noah asked, and the exhaustion in his voice pulled Marcus back to immediate concerns. "Yes, buddy. Let's go get dinner." They drove back into Riverside, and Marcus stopped at the diner on Main Street, the same diner where he'd worked summers during high school, serving coffee and pancakes to farmers and truck drivers and anyone passing through who needed a meal and a moment of rest. The place looked exactly the same down to the crack in the corner booth and the faded Coca-Cola sign above the counter. The waitress, a woman named Debbie who'd worked there since before Marcus was born, brought them menus and water. "Heard about Theodore," she said, her voice kind. "I'm real sorry, honey. He was good people." "Thank you," Marcus said. "Also heard about the will." Debbie's expression turned sympathetic. "Don't pay attention to what people are saying. Your grandfather had his reasons for doing things the way he did." "What are people saying?" Debbie hesitated, then decided honesty was better. "That Vincent got the estate and you got stuck with that old windmill. That it wasn't fair. That Theodore must have been confused at the end." She leaned in slightly. "But I don't believe that for a second. Theodore's mind was sharp as a tack. If he gave you that windmill, he had a good reason." Marcus managed to smile. "I'm starting to think you're right." They ordered burgers and fries. While they waited, Marcus pulled out his phone and started researching hidden wealth, secret fortunes, estate planning, trying to find information about situations similar to his. What he found was alarming. Stories of families torn apart by unexpected inheritances. Legal battles lasting years, assets frozen during disputes, tax implications that could consume half the value before anyone saw a penny. The more he read, the more he understood that having $50 million and actually accessing $50 million were two very different things. He needed help, professional help, a lawyer certainly, probably an accountant, maybe a financial advisor who specialized in large estates. But who could he trust? Anyone he contacted would know about the money. Word would spread. Vincent would find out. The family would descend like vultures. The pressure would be immense. What happens next will turn this night upside down, reveal a truth nobody expected, and remind us why sometimes the quietest voices carry the most power. Stay tuned to see what happens next. If you're enjoying the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more. Their food arrived, and Marcus forced himself to eat, though he could barely taste it. Noah, exhausted from the day's emotional roller coaster, fell asleep in the booth before finishing his fries. Marcus paid the bill, left a generous tip despite his precarious finances, and carried Noah back to the car. He should have driven back to Billings, should have gone home, put Noah to bed, tried to get some sleep before his shift at the warehouse tomorrow, but instead found himself driving back to the windmill, pulled by the same force that had brought him here in the first place. The sun had set completely, and the windmill stood as a dark silhouette against the star-filled Montana sky. Marcus parked the car and sat quietly, listening to Noah's soft breathing from the back seat, gathering his scattered thoughts. Carefully, he exited the car, leaving the door open to hear if Noah woke, and approached the windmill with his phone's flashlight piercing the darkness. Inside, he moved the dirt aside and opened the trapdoor once more. Descending the stone steps felt different this time, less like discovery, more like coming home to an unfamiliar place. At the bottom, Marcus opened the metal cabinet again and methodically began removing items, studying each more closely than before. The bonds were U.S. Treasury securities dating back to the 1950s. The stock certificates included not just Microsoft but also Apple, Amazon, and Google, purchased when they were fledgling companies no one believed in. His grandfather had anticipated potential decades before profits materialized. The gold coins were pristine, minted across various years and locations. The cash bundles comprised old currency, some likely worth more than face value to collectors. But it was the journals that captivated Marcus most. Sitting on the cold stone floor, he read them page by page, tracing his grandfather's life through meticulous handwriting. Theodore had begun with almost nothing, the early loss of his wife, a small farm, and little else. He sold parcels of land strategically and invested with patience and prudence, diversifying wisely over decades, all while keeping his wealth secret. An entry from 1989 read, "I don't want them to treat me different. I just want to be Theodore, the man who knows good pie and the best fishing spots. The money is for when it truly matters, for the one who will use it right." Tears streamed down Marcus's face. His grandfather had lived simply by choice, while secretly amassing a fortune meant not only for protection but to ensure genuine love and respect. He'd crafted this moment for Marcus, a legacy beyond money. Further reading revealed detailed instructions for this situation, contact info for a trusted lawyer in Kansas City, legal structuring to minimize taxes, filing order, and warnings about family disputes. "Vincent will fight you," Theodore had written. "He'll claim unsound mind, undue influence. He'll bury you in lawsuits and stress. But you're stronger. You've been strong your whole life. When it gets hard, remember this isn't about money, it's about honoring what I built and building something new." Marcus closed the journal and surveyed the small chamber. This was more than a storage room. It was a classroom, a blueprint for transforming nothing into something valuable. His grandfather had left not just wealth, but wisdom and faith in Marcus's strength to carry it forward. The sun had set completely, and the windmill was a dark shape against the star-filled Montana sky. Marcus parked, sat for a moment listening to Noah's soft breathing, gathering his thoughts. He carefully exited the car, leaving the door open to hear if Noah woke, and approached the windmill with his phone's light cutting through the darkness. Inside, he moved the dirt and opened the trapdoor again. Descending felt less like discovery and more like coming home. At the bottom, he opened the cabinet and studied its contents more carefully than before: bonds from the 1950s, stock certificates for early investments in Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, and Google, pristine gold coins, and old currency bundles. The journals revealed his grandfather's story of starting with almost nothing, selling farm parcels strategically, investing patiently, diversifying, and keeping the fortune secret to maintain independence and true relationships. Detailed instructions in the journals guided Marcus to a trusted Kansas City lawyer who had quietly structured the estate to minimize taxes and legal complications. The warnings about Vincent's likely contest were clear. "You're stronger than him," his grandfather wrote, reminding Marcus that this was about honoring what was built, not just money. Marcus climbed back up, covered the trapdoor, and stood in the cool night air drifting through the stones. Tomorrow, he would start contacting the lawyer and preparing for the legal battles ahead. Tonight, he allowed himself to believe things might finally be okay. Instead of returning to Billings, Marcus stopped at the town's small motel, carried Noah inside, and tucked him into a bed. Sitting by the window with his phone and grandfather's letter, Marcus considered calling family or friends but chose to keep the secret for now. He emailed the Kansas City lawyer, requesting a confidential meeting, and felt a breath he hadn't realized he was holding finally release. Outside, the wind rattled gently, and the distant train whistle cut through the quiet night. Marcus watched over his sleeping son, guardian of a secret fortune and the heavy responsibility ahead, waiting for what morning and the future would bring. If you want guidance in finding trusted estate lawyers like those in Kansas City who specialize in inheritance and probate disputes, firms such as Gates Shields Ferguson Swall Hammond PA provide experienced and personalized representation to navigate such complex legal matters effectively. The enormity of it all pressed down on Marcus like physical weight. $50 million. The number still didn't feel real. Nothing felt real. He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, sunlight streamed through the thin motel curtains, and Noah sat up in bed, looking confused. "Papa, where are we?" "We're in Riverside, buddy. I thought we'd stay here for a few days. Would that be okay?" Noah considered this, then nodded. "Can we have pancakes for breakfast?" "Absolutely. Get dressed, and we'll go to the diner." While Noah was in the bathroom, Marcus checked his phone. He had an email response from Arthur Whitmore sent early that morning. "Miss Blackwood, I've been expecting to hear from you. Theodore was a valued client and friend for many years. I understand you have questions about your inheritance. I'm available to meet today if you can get to Kansas City. This matter should be handled quickly and discreetly. Please call my direct line to arrange." Marcus's hand shook as he dialed. Arthur Whitmore speaking, a professional male voice answered. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Marcus Blackwood. I just received your email." "Miss Blackwood. Thank you for calling, and condolences on Theodore's passing. He was remarkable. I assume you discovered what was hidden at the Windmill." "I have." "Good. That means we can move forward. How much did you remove from the location?" "Nothing. I documented everything with photos but left it all there." "Excellent. Don't remove anything until we have proper security and insurance in place. Can you come to Kansas City today? There's much to discuss, and time is critical." "Critical? How?" "Your brother filed a petition yesterday contesting the will, claiming dementia and undue influence. The petition also requests all assets be frozen pending investigation." He paused. "She doesn't know what she's contesting yet, but she will soon. We need to move faster." Marcus's stomach dropped. "How did you know she'd do that?" "Theodore predicted it. He knew Vincent's character. We prepared for this years ago. But you mustn't tell anyone what you found. No family, friends, or social media. Keep living as before. Can you do that?" "Yes, I think so." "Good. Be at my office at 1 p.m. The address is in the email. Come alone. We have a lot to do and little time." The call ended, leaving Marcus' heart pounding. Vincent was already attacking, trying to take what wasn't his, exactly as their grandfather had feared. But Theodore had prepared and protected them. "Noah, I'm ready for pancakes," his son announced, emerging with his shirt on backwards and hair sticking up wildly. Marcus smiled. "Come here. Let me fix that shirt." Hand in hand, they walked to the diner, and for a brief moment, Marcus pretended it was just a normal morning before everything changed again. Later at Arthur Whitmore's office on the 23rd floor in downtown Kansas City, Marcus sat across from a sharp-eyed, silver-haired man who spent an hour explaining how complicated and life-changing this inheritance truly was. $50 million, Arthur said, reading from a document on his desk. That's the conservative estimate based on current market values, before taxes, legal fees, or any adjustments. Your grandfather was one of the most astute investors I've worked with over 4 decades. Marcus stared at the number on the paper Arthur had turned toward him. Even seeing it officially calculated, it didn't feel real. "How?" Marcus asked. "How did he do this?" Arthur smiled, a mix of admiration and sadness. "Patience, primarily. Theodore started investing in 1962, right after his wife passed. He had about $15,000 from selling farm equipment and a small life insurance policy. Most widowers would have held onto that money tightly, living off it slowly. Theodore invested it. He bought stock in a new company called Walmart. Sam Walton was just starting to expand beyond Arkansas. People thought he was crazy. 5 years later, that investment was worth $200,000. He sold half, invested the profits in other companies, kept the rest, and kept doing that for 60 years. Arthur pulled out a chart showing the growth of Theodore's portfolio. It started nearly flat in the 1960s, climbed in the 70s and 80s, then shot upward through the 90s and exploded in the 2000s. He had perfect timing, not luck, Arthur continued. He did his research. Read annual reports, attended shareholder meetings, talked to people at those companies. He looked for businesses solving real problems, with good management and fair treatment of employees. Then held investments for decades, letting compound interest grow his wealth. Why hide it? Marcus asked. Why live on that farm, drive that old pickup, dress modestly if he could have had anything? Because money changes people, Arthur said, leaning back. It changes how people see you and how you see yourself. Theodore saw families torn apart by sudden wealth, cousins fighting, children never working, grandchildren entitled. He wanted no part of that. So he lived simply, invested quietly, and waited. Waited for what? Arthur's expression softened. Waited for you. He spoke about you often. How hard you worked, raising Noah alone after that worthless ex left. How you never complained, never asked for help, just pushed forward. He said you had character, that's the key word. He believed you would use this fortune as he intended, not to stop striving but to create choices, to help others, to build meaning. Marcus's throat tightened. And Vincent? Arthur's face hardened. Your brother is exactly the kind of person Theodore wanted to avoid, someone who measures worth in dollar signs, who feels entitled just because she exists, someone who'd squander it on status symbols within a generation. He pulled out another document. This is the petition Vincent filed yesterday. It's aggressive. It claims Theodore suffered dementia, that you exercised undue influence, and demands the will be invalidated and the estate split equally. But it's false. Theodore was fully coherent. I barely saw him in the last 2 years because of work, but we can prove this. Theodore had cognitive assessments done by 3 neurologists months before his death, each certified sound mind. Marcus's grandmother had meticulously kept records of every family interaction, dates, times, summaries. Arthur explained that Marcus had visited infrequently due to work and distance, while Vincent visited less often and mostly asked for money. Marcus winced. Vincent had repeatedly requested money that Theodore wisely refused, knowing it would vanish without lasting benefit. Arthur laid out what would happen next. Vincent's lawyers would demand financial disclosures and intensify efforts once they learned about the $50 million estate. They would probe Marcus's life for anything to claim undue influence or manipulation, prolonging a public and painful legal battle. Could they win? No. Theodore's planning was too thorough, but they could delay and complicate matters for years, unless Marcus's legal team was smarter. Arthur revealed that Theodore had set up an irrevocable trust 20 years ago, gradually transferring about $30 million into it. Marcus was the sole beneficiary. Those trust assets wouldn't be part of the probate estate, meaning they couldn't be contested through the will. Thus, Marcus already had access to a substantial portion of the fortune. The remaining $20 million was within the estate proper and subject to Vincent's challenge, but Theodore included a no-contest clause in the trust. Anyone who contests the will forfeits claims to trust assets and reduces their estate share to $1. Vincent's lawyers didn't yet know this, believing it a standard dispute. Arthur framed it as a final chance Theodore gave Vincent to back off gracefully or lose everything. It's almost cruel, but maybe a lesson in greed and consequences, he said. Theodore had believed in second chances. The next 2 hours involved document reviews, signing papers, setting up secure accounts, and planning the estate's authentication and protection. Arthur would handle legal matters, trusted accountants would verify bonds and certificates, and a security company would discreetly transfer valuables from the Windmill to a secure vault. Marcus was instructed to live normally, working at his warehouse job, living simply, keeping the inheritance secret. Van Vincent can't know what you found or that you're preparing. The element of surprise is key. Let her think you're just a poor single dad stuck with a pile of rocks. Let her overreach. When the time is right, we end this. Leaving Arthur's office, Marcus felt like he'd stepped into someone else's life. Descending the 23 floors, walking into the bustling Kansas City streets, the $50 million fortune still felt both unreal and a quietly crushing reality. Marcus picked up Noah from the Brennan's house, where his son was covered in flour, grinning ear to ear. "Papa, we made chocolate chip cookies, and Mrs. Martha showed me how to feed the chickens. There's a cat named Whiskers who let me pet him, even though Mr. Thomas says he usually doesn't like people." "That's wonderful, buddy." Marcus hugged Noah, breathing in the smell of cookies and innocence. Thomas walked Marcus to the car. "Everything go okay?" "It's complicated, but Mr. Whitmore seems to know what he's doing. Arthur's good people, I've known him 30 years. He'll take care of us." Thomas glanced back at the house where Martha waved from the window. "If you need anything, Marcus, anything at all, we're here. Theodore was like family to us." "That makes you family, too." Marcus felt tears threatening again. "Thank you. That means more than you know." Driving back to Billings as the sun set, painting the sky in orange and purple, Noah fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the day's adventure. Marcus drove on autopilot, his mind cycling through everything Arthur had told him, everything coming, everything about to change. His phone rang as he pulled into his apartment complex, a blocked number. He answered cautiously. "Hello, Marcus." Vincent's sharp, cold voice cut through tense silence. "We need to talk." Marcus's stomach dropped. "About what?" "Don't play stupid. I know you went to Kansas City today. Met with a lawyer. What are you planning? How do you know where I went?" "I have friends, Marcus, people who keep me informed." "Now answer. Why are you lawyering up over a pile of rocks? What aren't you telling me?" Marcus's mind raced. "Stay calm. Don't reveal anything. I wanted legal advice about the inheritance. The Windmill needs work if I'm going to sell it. I wanted to know my options." "You're lying. You spent 3 hours in that office. Nobody spends that long discussing an old windmill." Vincent's voice hardened. "What did grandfather really leave you? What are you hiding?" "Nothing. I'm not hiding anything. I'm going to find out." "You know that, right?" "I filed to contest the will. I'll have lawyers digging through everything. If there's something you're hiding, I'll find it, and I'll make sure you regret trying to cut me out." "I'm not cutting you out. You got the house. The land. Everything valuable. I got a broken-down windmill. I'm the one who should be upset." Vincent laughed, a sound without humor. "You always were a terrible liar, little brother. Fine, play your games. But remember, I have resources. Money, connections, lawyers who specialize in breaking estates and finding hidden assets. If grandfather left you something he didn't leave me, I'll find it, and I'll take it. That's a promise." She hung up before Marcus could respond. Marcus sat in his car, hands shaking, heart pounding. Vincent knew something was wrong, was already suspicious and digging. The element of surprise Arthur had emphasized was rapidly deteriorating. But what could Marcus do? He couldn't speed up authentication, force the legal system to move faster, or protect assets still being catalogued. He carried Noah upstairs, put him to bed, then sat alone at his tiny kitchen table and called Arthur. He answered on the first ring. "What happened?" Vincent called. "She knows I went to Kansas City. Knows I met with you. She's suspicious, threatening to find whatever I'm hiding." Arthur was quiet. She must have someone watching you or tracking your phone. That's concerning, but not unexpected. Here's what we do, Arthur said. Tomorrow, you're going to call Vincent back. Tell her the truth, or part of it. Tell her you found some old documents at the Windmill and wanted legal advice about whether they were valuable. Arthur advised Marcus on a strategy for dealing with Vincent. Tell her the lawyer said the old documents and coins are mostly worthless. Maybe a few $100s if she finds the right collector. Make it boring, disappointing, make her think you wasted her time getting worked up over nothing. Will she believe it? Marcus asked. Probably not. But it'll buy us time while she tries to prove you're lying. Meanwhile, we accelerate our timeline. Security will remove everything from the Windmill tomorrow night. We'll work non-stop authenticating documents and preparing to reveal everything in court if necessary, but on our terms, not hers. Arthur paused. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Are you ready for that? Marcus thought about his son sleeping quietly in the next room, about his car's broken check engine light, the mounting bills, and the diner job that left his feet aching. He thought about his grandfather's 60 years of careful work, trusting Marcus to honor it. No, he said quietly. I'm not walking away. Grandpa trusted me. I'll see this through. Whatever it takes. Good. Then get some rest. Tomorrow we go to war. The next 3 weeks were the longest of Marcus's life. He went to work at the warehouse, smiled at co-workers, and pretended everything was normal. Meanwhile, Arthur's team worked rapidly authenticating every document, transferring assets, and establishing a legal framework to protect Marcus's inheritance. The Windmill was emptied under cover of darkness, with Thomas Brennan overseeing to keep the town ignorant. Vincent escalated aggressively, filing motions, demanding depositions, forcing disclosures. Marcus faced a deposition, sitting across from 3 lawyers grilling him about his relationship with Theodore, visits, conversations, and potential influence on the will. Marcus answered honestly, refusing to be rattled. The strain showed, he lost weight, barely slept, and flinched at every phone ring. Noah repeatedly asked if Papa was okay or why they couldn't return to Riverside to see the Windmill. Marcus assured him all was well, but Noah sensed otherwise. The breakthrough came 3 weeks and 2 days after Marcus's first meeting with Arthur. The authentication was complete, the trust assets secured, and the legal protections ironclad. Arthur filed a detailed response to Vincent's contest showing the trust's existence, the estate's full value, Theodore's cognitive assessments proving sound mind, documented evidence of Vincent's repeated requests for money and Theodore's refusals, and most importantly, the no-contest clause that risked Vincent losing everything. Arthur called Marcus at work. It's done. The response was filed an hour ago. Vincent's lawyers are receiving it now. By tonight, this will be over. Marcus sat down, overwhelmed. His manager Denise brought water and asked if he was okay. He nodded, silence heavy with relief and fear. There's one more thing, Arthur added. The local news picked up the story. A $50 million estate dispute in a small Montana town makes compelling headlines. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know. Your life is about to change in ways you can't control. Maya wasn't ready, but when Arthur asked, she said yes anyway. What else was there to say? That night, Vanessa called. Maya almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. There was a long silence before Vanessa's voice came, smaller, shocked. $50 million. Yes, Maya said quietly. She had $50 million, yet lived simply, drove an old car, wore modest clothes. She wasn't secretly rich, she was privately wealthy. Don't lecture me, Vanessa's voice cracked. You got $50 million. Do you understand what you took from me? I didn't take anything. Grandpa gave you what he wanted, $4.2 million in property. More than most people see in a lifetime. But it wasn't enough for you. It never is because you got less. She chose me over you. Vanessa was crying, something Maya rarely heard. Why? What did you do to make him love you more? Nothing. I loved him without expecting anything in return. I called every week, even when exhausted. Brought Noah to visit despite the long drive and cost. I listened to stories I'd heard 100 times. Not for money, I didn't even know he had money. I did it for love. Did you? Did you love him? Or did you love what you thought he could give you? Because every visit you asked for something, money for a car, for vacations, for investments. Grandpa kept records. I've seen them. You treated him like a bank. There was silence. The no contest clause is enforceable, Maya said gently. Arthur confirmed it. By contesting the will, you forfeited your claim. The house reverts to the estate, which means it comes to me. You get $1 as per trust documents. That's it. You had $4.2 million. You could have taken it, been grateful, moved on. But you couldn't stand the idea I got something you didn't. So you challenged it. Now you have nothing. You could share. We're brothers, Marcus. If you'd been kind, showed understanding, maybe we could have worked it out. But you called me a liar. Threatened me. Tried to take what Grandpa meant for me. So, no. I'm not giving you anything. You made your choice. Live with it. Maya hung up before Vincent could reply. Her hand shook, waves of nausea, anger, sadness, triumph, and guilt crashed over her simultaneously. Noah appeared at the kitchen doorway clutching his stuffed rabbit. Papa, are you crying? A little, buddy. But it's okay. Sometimes grown-ups cry when big things happen. Good big things or bad big things. Both. Life's complicated like that. Maya pulled Noah close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo, feeling his small weight, trying to find center in a world tilting out of control. The next morning, her phone exploded with calls, texts, messages. Old friends wanted to reconnect. Distant relatives called to congratulate. Former co-workers asked if she was hiring. The diner manager warned reporters were outside her apartment. Arthur called urgently. We need security now. Maya sat on her bed, Noah beside her watching cartoons, the full weight of what was coming crashing down like a wave. This was Marcus's life now, public, scrutinized, judged. Everyone had opinions about how he should use the money, how he should spend it, whether he deserved it. Privacy was gone. Anonymity was gone. The simple, struggling life he'd known for 25 years was completely gone. But as he sat, paralyzed by the magnitude of it all, he remembered something Theodore had written in his journals: money is just a tool. It's what you build with it that matters. Don't let the tool use you. You use the tool. Marcus took a deep breath, then another. He picked up his phone and started making calls, first to Arthur to arrange security and media protocols, then to the warehouse job to give notice. He felt guilty but couldn't keep working with reporters following his every move. He called Thomas Brennan to thank him and ask for help with managing the farmhouse, as Vincent certainly wasn't getting it. By noon, 3 security guards stood outside Marcus's apartment, keeping reporters away. By evening, Arthur scheduled a press conference where Marcus would make a brief statement and then refuse questions. By night, Marcus began listing ways he wanted to use this money, a weighty responsibility but an impossible gift. 2 weeks later in court, Vincent appeared with lawyers, defeated but defiant. Marcus sat beside Arthur, feeling like a spectator in someone else's life. The judge reviewed documents, questioned briefly, and ruled in Marcus's favor in under 30 minutes. The trust and will were valid, Theodore was of sound mind, and the no contest clause enforceable. Vincent's challenge was dismissed with prejudice. Do you have anything to say to your brother? The judge asked. Marcus looked at Vincent and saw not the cruel, ambitious man but the sibling he once knew, the kid who taught Marcus to ride a bike, the teen who protected him from bullies, the young man who had lost himself chasing status and approval. I'm sorry it ended this way, Marcus said quietly. I'm sorry Grandpa couldn't trust you with this. And I'm sorry you don't see he was trying to teach you something. It was never about the money. It was about character. Maybe someday you'll understand. Vincent said nothing and walked out with his lawyers. Marcus knew he'd probably never see him again. It should have made him sad. Maybe someday it would. For now, he just felt exhausted. Arthur put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. It's over. Truly over. The estate is yours, money and future. What will you do? Marcus thought about his grandfather spending 60 years building something meaningful, about Noah growing up with opportunities Marcus never had, and about the single fathers struggling in Billings, Riverside, and everywhere else, always one bad month away from disaster. I'm going to build something, Marcus said. Something lasting. Something to help those who need it. Something that will make Grandpa proud. He already is proud, Arthur said. I spent 20 years watching him prepare for this moment. He knew exactly who you were and what you'd become. You've already made him proud just by being you. They walked out into the bright Kansas afternoon. Reporters shouted, cameras flashed, security made a path. Marcus held Noah's hand and walked through it all, head high and shoulders back, just like Grandpa taught him, ready to face whatever came next. 6 months after the court hearing, Marcus stood in the lobby of a building that hadn't existed when this all began. The Theodore Blackwood Foundation now occupied 3 floors of renovated warehouse space in downtown Billings, with exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and windows that let in so much light the whole place seemed to glow. The foundation's mission statement was etched into the glass entrance doors in his grandfather's handwriting, words taken straight from the journals, to provide not charity, but opportunity, not handouts, but hand-ups, not sympathy, but partnership. Marcus had spent those 6 months learning what it meant to be wealthy, and the education had been brutal. He discovered money didn't make problems disappear, it just changed which problems he had. Instead of worrying about rent, he worried about investment strategies. Instead of managing a household budget, he managed a foundation budget in the tens of millions. Instead of choosing between the electric bill or groceries, he decided which of 1,000 worthy causes deserved funding and which would have to wait. But he had also discovered something else: money, used correctly, could change lives in ways he had never imagined. The foundation had already helped 237 single fathers across Montana, men who had been exactly where Marcus was 6 months ago, drowning in bills and exhaustion, one crisis away from collapse. The foundation didn't just give money. It provided comprehensive support, job training, childcare assistance, housing subsidies, educational opportunities, mental health services, legal aid, and most importantly, a community of people who understood because they'd been there themselves. Marcus walked the building, talking with staff, checking programs, listening to stories. In the job training center, a man named Patrick was learning medical coding, a skill that would let him work remotely once certified. In the childcare facility, 15 children played under watchful teachers while their dads attended classes or job interviews. Upstairs in the housing office, a counselor helped a man named Jason navigate leaving an abusive relationship and finding safe, affordable housing for himself and his 2 kids. This was what $50 million looked like when used right, not mansions or yachts or private jets, but opportunity spreading like ripples, touching lives, building futures. Mr. Blackwood, a young woman approached with a clipboard in hand. Sarah Cheng, the Foundation's program director, a Stanford graduate who left a lucrative corporate job to do meaningful work. The new applicants are here for interviews. You ready? Marcus nodded. Every week, he personally interviewed a selection of fathers applying for assistance. Arthur told him he could delegate, but Marcus insisted on meeting them, hearing their stories, kept him grounded, grateful, honest. For 3 hours he listened. A man whose wife died suddenly, leaving him with 3 kids burdened by medical debt. A man fleeing domestic violence with nothing but the clothes on his back. A father working full-time, budgeting carefully until his car broke down and the repair cost caused cascading eviction. Each story was different. Each was the same. Each was Marcus's story, different names, details. By the time he finished, Marcus was emotionally exhausted but energized. This was why his grandfather built that fortune. This was why Theodore had hidden the fortune for 60 years, protecting and growing it, waiting for the right person to unleash its potential. Not to make one person obscenely wealthy, but to create a tool that could lift hundreds, thousands, maybe millions out of struggles like those Theodore had faced. Marcus returned to the modest home he'd bought, not a mansion, but a comfortable 4-bedroom with a yard where Noah could play. Noah was in the kitchen with Rosa, the housekeeper Marcus hired, baking something cinnamon-scented that made the whole house feel warm. Marcus had been careful to keep Noah's life as normal as possible, limiting the money's impact on their daily routine. Noah still had chores, still heard no regularly. Marcus watched too many wealthy families spoil children into entitlement, and that would never happen to Noah if Marcus had a say. "Papa!" Noah ran over, flour on his nose. "We're making snickerdoodles. Want to help?" "Always." Marcus washed his hands and joined, rolling dough, coating cinnamon sugar, placing cookies on sheets. Rosa chatted about her day, her grandchildren, normal life. Except nothing felt normal anymore, not really. Marcus wondered if it ever would again. His phone buzzed, a text from Arthur. "Call me when you can. It's about Vincent." Marcus's stomach tightened. He hadn't heard from or about Vincent since court. Vincent had vanished from Riverside and reportedly moved to California, whereabouts unknown. Part of Marcus hoped time might heal old wounds, another part knew some cuts ran too deep. He excused himself to call Arthur. "What about Vincent?" "Trouble." Arthur's voice was neutral. "Lost her job 3 months ago, burned savings, evicted in San Diego. Living in her car for 6 weeks. She called my office asking about appealing the court's decision or any loophole. I told her no. Then she asked if I could get you to help her." Marcus sank into the chair. "She wants money. She needs money. There's a difference." Arthur said, "I'm not telling you what to do, but you should know." After the call, Marcus watched the sunset paint the sky gold and crimson. He thought of Vincent living in a car, the proud, vain sister who prized status and appearances above all else. The irony stung. She'd gambled everything seeking more, now she had nothing. Marcus had accepted rocks and found a fortune. But there was no satisfaction in Vincent's downfall, only sadness and waste. She'd been offered choices throughout, consistently choosing greed over gratitude, entitlement over humility, appearance over authenticity. Now she paid the price. Marcus texted Arthur, "Give her my number. Tell her she can call me." 3 days later, Marcus was reviewing grant applications at the foundation when his phone lit up with a California number he didn't recognize. Marcus stepped into his office and closed the door before answering. "Hello, it's me." Vanessa's voice was small, defeated, nothing like the sharp, confident tone he remembered. "Arthur said you'd be willing to talk." "I am." "How are you, Vanessa?" A long silence followed. "I'm living in my car, Marcus. I shower at the gym. I can barely afford the membership. I eat once a day, if I'm lucky. I lost everything. I'm not great." "What happened to the $4.2 million? You had the house and the land." "I mortgaged the house before the court case, thinking I'd need money for lawyers. When I lost, the bank foreclosed, the land was sold. After the mortgage was paid, there was barely anything left. I used what was left to move to California, hoping to start over, but jobs fell through. Apartments were too expensive, and everything spiraled." Her voice cracked. "I made mistakes, Marcus. I was greedy and cruel. I destroyed everything because I couldn't stand that you got more than me. Why are you calling?" "Because I'm desperate. Because I don't know what else to do. Because you're my brother, and I'm asking for help." Marcus closed his eyes. This was the moment, a test between mercy and justice, forgiveness and consequence. He could say no, let Vanessa live with her choices. Nobody would blame him. Even Theodore, who believed in second chances, had cut her off. But he thought about those journals and his grandfather's words: character isn't what you do when it's easy, it's what you do when it's hard, when the person asking doesn't deserve it, when forgiving costs you, when kindness means vulnerability. I'll help you, Marcus said quietly. But not the way you're thinking. I'm not giving you money, Vanessa. I'm giving you opportunity. The foundation has a program for women in crisis. Temporary housing, job training, counseling, and support. You'll live in shared housing with other women rebuilding lives. You'll work with a counselor to address whatever led you here. You'll complete job training in a field with good prospects and help others who come after you. If you complete the program, the foundation will help you transition to permanent housing and stable employment. Silence. Marcus could almost hear Vanessa's pride wrestling with desperation. You want me to live in a shelter? I want you to rebuild your life properly, with support, accountability, humility, and courage. You can say no and hang up now. But if you say yes, you must commit fully. No cutting corners, no special treatment because you're family. You'll be another woman following the same rules, doing the same work. If you finish, you'll have skills, stable housing, and a real life built on your own effort. Isn't that what you wanted? To succeed on your own merits. Another long silence. Then quietly, when can I start? 2 weeks later, Marcus drove to the foundation's residential facility, a renovated apartment complex housing up to 40 women, and watched Vanessa arrive with 2 garbage bags, everything she owned. She looked different, thinner, older. The fancy clothes replaced by thrift store jeans and a t-shirt. The styled hair now a simple ponytail. Manicured nails gone, bitten raw. She looked, Marcus realized, like the sister she had been before ambition and status hardened her. They stood awkwardly in the parking lot. Thank you, Vanessa finally said, for this, for not just sending me away. Don't thank me yet. The program was hard. Most women who started didn't finish. It demanded real change, real work, and brutal honesty about past mistakes. I know Sarah already went over everything with me. I'm ready. Or at least willing to try. That's all anyone can ask, Vanessa said. Maya started to walk away, then turned back. Vanessa, one more thing. Grandpa didn't cut you off because he didn't love you. He cut you off because he loved you enough to let you face consequences. He believed struggle builds character, hardship teaches lessons comfort never can. It was a gift, even if it didn't feel like one. Don't waste it. Vanessa nodded, tears streaming down her face. I won't. I promise. Over several months, Maya watched her brother transform, not dramatically, no movie moment, but gradually, painfully with setbacks and breakthroughs. Vincent struggled with rules, shared living, counselors, admitting mistakes, accepting responsibility, shedding the victim story. But she kept showing up, trying, pushing through hard days. She completed paralegal training, discovered a knack for legal research and document prep. She made friends with others in the program, different stories but similar struggles, and began volunteering to help newcomers, turning her failures into lessons. Slowly, the bitter, entitled woman who arrived with 2 garbage bags became someone humbler, kinder, more authentic. Meanwhile, Marcus continued building his grandfather's legacy. The foundation expanded with satellite offices in 3 Kansas cities. Programs grew sophisticated, comprehensive, and effective. Marcus hired experts, listened to feedback, adjusted approaches, knowing good intentions were not enough. Systems, accountability, and ongoing evaluation were essential. The most meaningful project was the Windmill. Marcus decided that the structure where Theodore hid his fortune should symbolize what's possible with vision, patience, and perseverance. He hired architects, engineers, and historical restoration experts to rebuild the windmill, not as a museum, but as a functional structure with modern turbines generating electricity for Riverside, feeding power back to the grid, lowering residents' energy costs, creating a tangible daily benefit from Theodore's legacy. The restoration took nearly a year. When finished, the windmill looked both ancient and modern, honoring history while serving contemporary needs. At its base, Marcus commissioned a small museum where visitors could learn about Theodore's life, investment philosophy, and the foundation he inspired. The underground chamber where the fortune was hidden was preserved exactly as Marcus found it, accessible by tour, testament to his grandfather's ingenuity and planning. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in May, exactly 1 year after Marcus first opened that trapdoor, and his life changed forever. The entire town showed up. Thomas and Martha Brennan stood proudly in the front row. Arthur Whitmore came with his wife. Sarah Cheng brought the whole foundation staff. News crew set up cameras. Standing slightly apart from the crowd, looking nervous yet hopeful, was Vincent. She had completed the foundation program 3 weeks earlier and now worked at a law firm that had hired 3 of the foundation's paralegal graduates. Vanessa had an apartment, a small one, but hers, and furniture she'd bought herself. She had begun rebuilding her life, one careful step at a time. Maya wasn't sure if they were ready to be siblings again or if too much had broken between them, but she invited Vanessa to the foundation's grand opening. Vanessa came. That had to mean something. Maya stepped to the podium as the windmill's newly restored blades slowly turned in the Kansas wind, generating power, something useful born from air, motion, and human ingenuity. Feeling her grandfather's presence strongly, she looked out over the crowd of people who had been part of her journey. 1 year ago, Maya began, I stood in this windmill thinking my grandfather had left me nothing, a pile of stones, a broken structure. Evidence I wasn't valued or loved, that I didn't matter. I was wrong. My grandfather left me everything. Not just money, though there was that, too. More importantly, he left lessons, patience, building slowly and carefully over time. He taught me about character, being trustworthy enough to hold responsibility. He taught me about vision, seeing potential where others see waste. And most of all, about legacy, building something that lasts beyond your own life. She gestured to the windmill. This structure has stood over 150 years. It was abandoned, forgotten, dismissed as worthless, but it was never worthless. It was waiting for someone to see what it could become. That's what my grandfather understood and tried to teach me. That's what I hope this foundation teaches others, that you are never worthless. Even when life beats you down. Even when you make mistakes. Even when the world dismisses you as broken and lost. We all have value. We all have potential. We all deserve second chances. The question is whether we are brave enough to take them, humble enough to accept help, and strong enough to do the hard work of becoming who we are meant to be. The crowd applauded warmly as the windmill turned with the afternoon breeze. Maya stepped down and walked through the crowd to Vanessa. Her sister was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. That was about me, wasn't it? The part about second chances. Vanessa whispered. It was about everyone, Maya replied. Including me. I got a second chance I didn't expect and didn't earn. All I did was love Grandpa and try to be good. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes the universe gives you what you need, not what you deserve. Maya held out her hand. Want to see the museum? There are pictures of Grandpa you've probably never seen. Vanessa took her hand, and together they entered the windmill, passing through the quiet space where Theodore's story was displayed in photos, journals, and ledgers. There was a photograph of a young man standing beside this very windmill in 1964, determined, fierce, full of plans nobody else saw. He was remarkable, Vanessa said quietly. I never appreciated that when he was alive. I just thought he was old and stuck in the past. I didn't see what he built. Neither did I, Maya admitted. Not until after he was gone. Maybe that's the lesson, that we don't truly see the full measure of people until we have distance to understand their choices. They stood silently, studying their grandfather's face in the photo, trying to recognize themselves in his story and legacy. Finally, Vanessa said, I don't expect us to be close again. I know I destroyed that. But maybe someday we could be siblings again. Not like before, but something new. Something honest. I'd like that. When you're ready, Maya said. When I'm ready. When we both learned enough to try again without hurting each other. Deal. They walked back outside where Noah was playing with Thomas Brennan's granddaughter. The two chased each other around the windmill's base, laughing freely, blissfully unaware of the heavy legacy surrounding them. Maya watched her son, thinking about the future he would have because of Theodore's careful planning, decisions made long before Noah was even born. Thomas came over, leaning on his cane. Theodore would be proud, he said simply, of all this, of you. I hope so. I'm trying to honor what he built. You're not honoring it, Thomas corrected gently, you're continuing it. That's better. Honoring the past is fine, but continuing the work, building on the foundation, making it grow, serve new people in new ways. That's what legacy really means. Maya felt something settle in her chest, some last piece of anxiety or doubt, finally letting go. She'd spent the year trying to prove she deserved the trust and the responsibility, but maybe the goal wasn't to prove anything. Maybe it was simply to keep building, keep growing, keep helping, and trust that the work itself was enough. Evening came. The crowd dispersed. The windmill's blades kept turning, patient and eternal, converting wind into power, metaphor into reality. Maya sent Noah home with Rosa, wanting a few more moments alone in this place where everything had changed. She descended the stone steps into the underground chamber, now empty of treasure but rich with memory. The metal cabinet stood open. The wooden crate was gone, but Eleanor's words etched in stone remained. Foundation built on patience, walls raised with wisdom, fortune secured through faith. Maya traced the grooves with her fingers. She thought about patience, decades of careful investing, never rushing, never panicking, just consistently making good decisions and letting time work its magic. She thought about wisdom, knowing when to hold on or let go, when to save or spend, when to speak or be silent. She thought about faith, believing in a future she wouldn't live to see, trusting her work would matter long after she was gone. I understand now, Maya whispered to the empty room, to her grandfather's spirit, to whatever force had orchestrated all of this. It was never about the money. It was always about what the money made possible. You didn't give me $50 million, Grandpa. You gave me the tools to build something meaningful. Thank you. Thank you for trusting me. For seeing something in me I didn't see myself. Thank you for teaching me wealth isn't what you have, but what you do with what you have. She climbed the stairs one last time. The sun had set, and carefully placed lights made the windmill glow against the dark Montana sky. Maya stood at the base, looking up at the structure her grandfather chose as the hiding place for his fortune, finally understanding why. Not because it was remote or easy to hide things, but because a windmill perfectly symbolized his life's work, taking something invisible and insubstantial, wind, potential, possibility, and converting it into something real and useful, power, opportunity, change. Theodore took small sums and, through patience, wisdom, and faith, created a fortune-generating opportunity for thousands. Just like the windmill turned invisible air into electricity. Maya pulled out her phone and called Noah. He answered on the second ring. Mama, are you coming home soon? Soon, baby. I wanted to ask you something first. Do you remember Grandpa Theodore? Marcus asked Noah. A little bit, Noah replied. He smelled like cookies, and he let me feed his chickens. Marcus smiled. He was more than that, buddy. He was one of the strongest, smartest, most remarkable men I've ever known. And he built something amazing that's going to help a lot of people. Someday, when you're older, I'll tell you the whole story. But for now, I want you to know that you come from a line of strong people, your great-grandfather, me, and you. We're builders, Noah. We take what we're given, even if it's not much, and we build something meaningful with it. Like you built the foundation, exactly like that. And someday, you'll build something, too, something that reflects who you are and what you believe in. You don't have to know what that is yet, just know that you can. That you have everything you need inside you already. Grandpa Theodore taught me that. Now, I'm teaching you. Okay, Papa. I love you. I love you, 2. Buddy. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Marcus hung up and took one last look at the windmill, a monument to patience, wisdom, and faith, a symbol of everything his grandfather had been and everything Marcus was becoming. He walked to his car and drove away from Riverside, toward home, toward Noah, toward the foundation, toward all the work still to be done and lives yet to be changed. The windmill kept turning behind him, its blades cutting through the night, generating power, creating light, proving that even broken things could be restored and made useful again. That nothing was ever truly worthless if you were willing to see its potential. That the greatest fortunes aren't counted in dollars but in the lives touched and the legacy left behind. Marcus had inherited $50 million. But what he really inherited was his grandfather's lesson that true wealth is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you build, share, and leave for those who follow. He drove through the Montana night, past farms, fields, and small towns where people struggled, dreamed, and worked to build better lives. He thought of how many lives the foundation would touch, how many stories would change. Because Theodore had been patient, wise, and faithful. Because Marcus was brave enough to open that trapdoor and descend into darkness. Because together they turned what looked like ruins into a beginning. The road stretched ahead, dark but navigable, unknown but not frightening, just like the future, just like the choices that mattered, just like Marcus's journey, from struggling single dad to guardian of a fortune, from recipient of charity to builder of legacy, from feeling worthless to knowing his worth. Marcus drove home through the darkness toward the light. The end. Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to keep the journey going with us. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you believe broken things still deserve to shine, that second chances can change everything, and that the greatest fortunes are the ones we build together.